Tonight, we're going to drift into one of history's quiet mysteries. Nothing loud, nothing stressful, just a slow walk into the past, the kind of story you can listen to while relaxing, lying back, maybe even yawning a little. If you fall asleep halfway, no worries. Even the people in this story disappeared, so you're in good company. This is the mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke. Before we jump into ships, old maps, and strange carvings on tree posts, let's first set the mood. Picture a place far away from city noise, where the air feels soft and warm, and the world moves a little slower. A place where waves roll in like they're trying not to disturb anyone, and the tall trees sway like they're telling secrets to the wind. That place is Roanoke Island, sitting quietly off the coast of North Carolina. Even today, Roanoke looks calm. The kind of calm that makes you think nature put a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the entire island. Green forests, long stretches of sand, water so still that the clouds look like they're admiring their own reflection. It's peaceful, it's gentle, it's the perfect spot for a bedtime story. But a long time ago, way back in 1587, something happened on this peaceful island. Something strange. Something no one has been able to fully explain for more than 400 years. More than 100 English settlers came here to start a new life, and then they vanished. No phone call, no goodbye note, not even a BRB going for snacks. Just gone. Strange, right? But don't worry, tonight we're not here to solve the mystery like detectives in a rush. We're here to float through it, gently, like a leaf on quiet water. So, let's rewind time a little. Imagine the world before phones, before internet, before people argued online about which Marvel movie is the best. We're going back to the late 1500s. Back then, England was full of brave explorers, big dreams, and even bigger hats. Europe was buzzing with stories about the New World, a continent across the ocean that most people had never seen. For English leaders at the time, the New World was like a giant blank page just waiting for their signature. They wanted land, power, and a little bragging rights. After all, Spain already had colonies. France had a few. And England was like, hey, we need one too. And so they set their eyes on the coast of North America. Now, Roanoke wasn't just any island. To the English, it looked like the perfect doorway into the New World. A place where they could build homes, trade goods, and maybe plant a few potatoes. Who knows? People in the 1500s were excited about potatoes. But from the beginning, Roanoke had a quiet, mysterious energy. The kind of place where you feel like the trees have been watching you for a long time. The island was home to Native American tribes who had lived there for generations, following the rhythm of nature, long before any English sailor even touched a ship. Back in 1587, when the settlers arrived, they were full of hope. They had families, dreams, and plans for a brand new community. But just a few years later, everything changed. Their houses were left behind. Their tools were left behind. Even the place where they kept their boats looked untouched. It was as if the people simply stood up one day, walked off into the trees, and never came back. And the thing is, nobody knows exactly why. Some say they joined native tribes. Some say they got lost in the forest. Some say storms carried them away. Others whispered darker things: sickness, attacks, hidden dangers. But no one has ever found real proof. Now, before you start imagining ghosts and scary shadows, take a breath. This is not a spooky story. This is a soft mystery. A quiet puzzle wrapped in ocean breeze. We're telling it slowly, like someone reading a fairy tale at the end of a long day. And honestly, the lost colony isn't just strange, it's also kind of fascinating. Think about it. More than 100 people just stepping out of history like, okay, bye, we're out, and never leaving a trace except for one carved word. But that part comes later. Right now, we're just setting the stage. A calm place, a gentle island, a moment in time frozen like a painting. If you stood on Roanoke Island today, right where the colony once stood, you'd hear birds calling softly, their voices carried by the wind. You'd hear water brushing against the shore. You might even hear the trees creaking, as if they're trying to tell you what happened centuries ago, but they're just too polite to speak loudly. Historians still scratch their heads. Archaeologists still dig tiny holes in the ground hoping for clues. Tourists still visit and stare at the spot where homes once stood. And storytellers, people like us, still talk about it because something about this mystery just sticks to you. Maybe it's the silence. Maybe it's the unanswered questions. Maybe it's simply the human curiosity that makes us want to know where these people went. But whatever it is, the mystery of Roanoke has lived on for more than 400 years. And tonight, we're going to explore it step by step, chapter by chapter, without rushing, without stress. Think of this like a calm walk through a museum after hours. The lights are soft, no one is pushing you, and you can take your time. So let's breathe out slowly. Let the day fade a little. Because now that we've introduced this quiet mystery, it's time to travel deeper into it. To learn why England tried so hard to build a home in a strange land. To meet the people who crossed an ocean for a dream. And to understand the moments that led to the colony's strange disappearance. But that's for the next chapter. For now, picture that peaceful island again. Roanoke. Trees resting under the sky. Water glowing in the afternoon sun. An island that has kept a secret for centuries. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet landscape, the story of 115 missing settlers waits for us. Let's drift deeper into the past now, all the way to England in the late 1500s. A place of big dreams, thick accents, and people who wore enough layers of clothing to survive 5 winters at once. The air smelled like rain, wood smoke, and probably too many horses. The buildings leaned a little, like they were tired from holding themselves up for so long. And everywhere you went, people were talking about the same exciting thing, the New World. See, back then, England was feeling, well, a little competitive. Spain already had shiny colonies packed with gold. France was also exploring. Even tiny Portugal was like, hey, we're out here too. England didn't want to be the only kid in the class without a colony. Imagine everyone else showing off their snacks, and England is standing there with empty hands thinking, we should probably get something too. And so the dream began. England wanted a foothold in the New World. Not just for fun, though exploration does sound fun, but for power, profit, and bragging rights. If they could build a settlement across the ocean, they could trade new things, find new routes, and maybe annoy Spain a little. And annoying Spain was basically a national hobby. Now, England wasn't ruled by just anyone at the time. They had Queen Elizabeth I, one of history's strongest queens. She had bright red hair, sharp intelligence, and probably enough fancy dresses to fill a small castle. Elizabeth wasn't the type to sit quietly. She wanted England to grow. She wanted ships, trade, naval power, and influence. Enter Sir Walter Raleigh. If England was a startup, Raleigh was the guy pitching the big idea in front of investors. He walks in like, hey, Your Majesty, what if, hear me out, we start a colony in the New World? Elizabeth liked the idea. Raleigh had charm, ambition, and a beard that said, I make bold decisions. So the Queen granted him the right to establish a colony across the sea, a whole new place the English would call Virginia, in honor of the Virgin Queen, as Elizabeth was known. But just to be clear, in the 1500s, Virginia wasn't one state. Oh no, they used that name for basically everything on the East Coast. If you dropped anything east of the Mississippi, they'd point and say, yes, yes, that's Virginia. All of that. So Raleigh gathered ships, sailors, craftsmen, and all the excitement he could muster. He didn't actually go to the colony himself, though. Instead, he sent other people, kind of like saying, hey, I have a great idea. You guys do it. I'll watch from here. But dreams are one thing, reality is another. And the reality was, England wasn't exactly swimming in money. They were not the superpower they would later become. They had strong ships, but not endless resources. And the ocean crossing? Let's just say flights didn't exist yet, and the sea was not the calm, blue emoji version of the ocean. It was wild, cold, and occasionally liked to throw ships around like toys. Still, England pushed forward. Ships were loaded with barrels, food, tools, seeds, spare ropes, and probably a few things no one needed, but someone insisted on bringing anyway. Explorers prepared to cross the Atlantic, a journey that would take weeks. No breaks. No snacks aisle. No entertainment except maybe staring at waves until your brain felt like soup. These voyages had one purpose: find land, build a settlement, make England proud. And in 1585, Raleigh sent his first group of settlers to the New World. Not families, not yet. Mostly soldiers and men trained to explore, scout, and defend. Think of it like a test run. If they survived, maybe England would send more people. Now, imagine the excitement back in England. People walking around markets whispering, "Have you heard? We're putting a colony across the sea." Truly, yes, yes. It's going to be amazing. I hope they bring back something cool. I hope they even stay alive. And of course, newspapers didn't exist yet, but if they did, the headlines would be dramatic. England sets sail for New World. Hopes high, expectations higher. Meanwhile, Spain was probably side-eyeing England from across Europe like, so you're trying to play the colony game too? Cute. Now, let's pause a moment and just picture England around 1585. The cobblestone streets, candles glowing from windows at dusk, people hurrying home before nightfall. Boats sitting in the harbors, sails tied neatly. And out on the docks, the brave men preparing to cross the Atlantic. These people weren't superheroes. They were farmers, carpenters, soldiers. Most of them had never left England, never seen the open sea stretch endlessly in all directions. Yet they stepped onto those ships anyway.
Why?
Maybe adventure. Maybe opportunity. Maybe a simple desire to start fresh somewhere else. Or maybe someone told them there would be gold. And let's be honest, the promise of gold has motivated more questionable decisions in history than anything else. Even though England was excited, they also knew the colonization attempt was risky. Disease, starvation, storms, conflicts, anything could happen. Back then, traveling across the Atlantic was almost like flipping a coin. Heads, you make it. Tails, you sink. But the dream of the New World was strong enough to push them forward. By the time the first colony idea took shape, the English imagined a beautiful land full of open space, good soil, friendly people, and endless resources. Not all of that was true, but hey, dreams don't always match reality. And so, the stage was set. England wanted to grow. Raleigh wanted glory. Queen Elizabeth wanted power. And the settlers wanted a new start. Everything was ready. Soon, the ships would sail. Soon, the explorers would look out over the blue-gray ocean, hoping the wind stayed calm. Soon, the English would step foot on Roanoke Island, a peaceful place that held a mystery waiting to happen. Little did they know that this dream, this big, bold move, would become one of the greatest unsolved stories in history. Let's slide into the next part of our story, the first Roanoke voyage, the one that came before the famous Lost Colony. Think of it as season 1 of a show where everyone tries their best. Everything goes wrong, and somehow they still ended up making a season 2. The year is 1585, and 5 ships, the Tiger, Roebuck, Lion, Elizabeth, and Dorothy, are getting ready to sail from England. And yes, ships back then had names that sounded like pets you'd give to a medieval king. On board were around 600 men. Soldiers, sailors, craftsmen, scientists, and a few gentlemen who probably brought way too many fancy clothes for a wilderness mission. This first colony wasn't meant to be a family town yet. It was more like a scouting team. Their job was simple: go to the New World, look around, survive, and send good news home. Easy, right? Well, not exactly. The sea wasted no time proving it had an attitude. The squad hadn't even reached their destination when storms came rolling in, shaking the ships like toys. Barrels slid, ropes snapped, and men tried their best not to fall into the ocean. At one point, the flagship, the Tiger, crashed into a sandbar and lost a good chunk of supplies. That was their first hint. Hey guys, maybe this trip is going to be tough. Still, they pushed forward and finally arrived at Roanoke Island, a small stretch of land surrounded by calm water and thick forests. To the tired, hungry Englishmen, it probably looked like paradise, or at least a place where nobody was yelling at them to fix the rigging. But Roanoke was not empty. The area was home to several Algonquian-speaking tribes, the Secotans, the Croatan, and the Roanoke people themselves. They had lived here for generations, fishing, farming, trading, and building their own world long before Europeans ever thought of crossing the Atlantic. And the English, well, they arrived like enthusiastic visitors who didn't fully understand they were actually intruders. Still, the first encounters with local tribes were mostly peaceful. Some native leaders looked at these strange pale men with odd clothes and thought, interesting. Meanwhile, the English looked at the locals and thought, nice, maybe they can help us not die. One of the English leaders, Ralph Lane, was put in charge of the Roanoke settlement. Lane was a soldier, strategic, strong-willed, and let's just say he wasn't the most patient guy in the world. He wasn't exactly the let's talk it out calmly type. More like the let's fix this problem immediately even if it causes 3 new problems type. But before any drama started, the English tried to settle in. They built a small fort, wooden walls shaped like a big square with pointy logs sticking out. Good enough to keep out wild animals, but maybe not good enough to keep out angry people if things ever went wrong. The men set up tents, unpacked tools, and tried to make the place feel like home. At first, they thought Roanoke was perfect. The land was green. The water was full of fish. Deer wandered around the woods like they owned the place because they basically did. The summer was warm, and the island felt calm. But it didn't take long for the English to realize something. They were not good at surviving here. Fishing? Harder than expected. Farming? The soil wasn't as friendly as they hoped. Hunting? The deer were fast, and the English were not. Supplies? Running out very, very quickly. They had planned to restock from the ships, but remember that storm? Yeah. A lot of their food and tools had been lost before they even arrived. So the English turned to the native tribes for help. And the tribes, curious and cautious, shared a little. Corn, fish, local knowledge. But these tribes had their own lives, their own food needs, and their own challenges. They weren't exactly prepared to feed 100 extra Englishmen who kept saying, please, we're starving again. As weeks passed, tension grew. Some tribes still helped. Others became distant. Rumors spread. Misunderstandings got worse. And Ralph Lane, Ralph Lane, made some choices that definitely did not help future English-native relations. At one point, Lane became convinced that a local chief named Wingina was plotting against the English. Whether that was true or not, we'll never know. But Lane decided to fix the situation the military way. Long story short, it led to an attack, the death of Wingina, and the total collapse of trust between the settlers and the nearby tribes. And once the trust was gone, so was the food supply. Without native support, the English were stuck. They didn't know the land well enough to survive alone. The island that first felt peaceful now felt like it was squeezing them from all sides. Rainstorms washed away their hopes. Mosquitoes attacked like tiny flying armies. Wildlife became smarter than the settlers, and hunger became a daily companion. Still, they held on. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Finally, the moment of rescue arrived, unexpectedly. In 1586, English privateer Sir Francis Drake happened to stop by Roanoke after raiding Spanish ships in the Caribbean. His ships were full of supplies, treasure, and probably a crew excited about showing off their loot. Lane and his men saw the ships and thought, "Thank goodness, we're saved." Drake offered food, tools, and even a ship for them to use. But then a huge storm hit, dragging the ship away before anyone could use it. At this point, the settlers were like, "Okay, the island is definitely cursed." After so many troubles, Lane decided enough was enough. The entire group packed up and sailed back to England with Drake. When the English left Roanoke, they left behind a few tools, some forts, and the first chapter of a mystery no one expected. Here's the funny part. Shortly after they left, another English ship arrived with fresh supplies, only to find the island completely empty. They shrugged, looked around, and then sailed back home. Timing in the 1500s was not great. So the first Roanoke colony? Not exactly a success story. More like a rough draft. But England didn't give up. They thought, "Okay, we made some mistakes. Let's try again, but better next time." And that decision would eventually lead to the creation of the 1587 colony, the one that would vanish into legend. In the next chapter, we'll look at that second attempt, the families, the children, the hope, and the beginning of the greatest mystery on American soil. Let's drift back into the story, nice and slow. Smooth your pillow, relax your shoulders, and imagine the soft sound of waves rolling onto a quiet shore. This is the chapter where hope rises again, where the English try one more time to build a new life across the ocean. This is the chapter where the famous lost colony truly begins. Raleigh tries again. Third time's the charm. Maybe. By 1587, Sir Walter Raleigh had already failed twice at settling Roanoke. But he wasn't the kind of guy to say, maybe this isn't for us. Let's go home. No. Raleigh believed in second chances, and apparently third chances too. But this time, he had a fresh vision. Not soldiers. Not rough explorers. Not restless men who got bored and wanted to go home with Drake. He imagined something softer. A real English community. Families. Children. Farmers. Carpenters. People who actually knew how to build things. His thinking probably went like this. When soldiers come, they fight. When families come, they settle. So England prepared a new group, the biggest one yet, more than 115 settlers. This wasn't just an experiment anymore. This was supposed to be a permanent English town in the New World. Governor John White, the calm in the storm. To lead the colony, Raleigh chose John White, a man who didn't just explore. He observed. He painted. He mapped. He studied people. John White was not loud, not aggressive, not the sword-swinging type. He was thoughtful, gentle, and actually cared about the settlers. A rare quality in leaders back then. Some people even say he would sit quietly and sketch birds while everyone else argued. Honestly, that sounds like the right kind of guy to lead families across the ocean. Calm. Focused. Not yelling every 5 minutes. And also, this part matters, his daughter Eleanor was coming along too. And she was pregnant. So yes, imagine being John White. You're leading 115 people to a wild, unknown land. And your daughter is about to have a baby in the middle of it. No pressure at all. Meet the settlers, not soldiers this time. Now, let's picture this new colony. These weren't bored soldiers itching to go home. These were real settlers, carpenters who could build houses, farmers who understood crops, blacksmiths who could repair tools, fishermen, craftsmen, mothers, fathers, children, and even a few adventurous grandparents who probably had no idea what they were signing up for. This group was meant to stay,
To plant, to grow.
to form a little England far from home. And mentally, the settlers were ready, excited, a little scared,
Probably seasick.
but ready. The plan: settle at Chesapeake Bay. Important part: Roanoke was not the plan. Raleigh actually wanted them to settle somewhere better, the Chesapeake Bay. It had richer soil, safer harbors, and friendlier land for farming. Everything Roanoke wasn't. Even John White agreed. Chesapeake would be a fresh start. More resources, more room, less drama. The 115 settlers boarded their ships dreaming of that place. But the sea always loves a plot twist. The dispute, a navigator changes everything. When the settlers reached the outer banks of modern North Carolina, something went wrong. A fight, a disagreement, a stubborn decision. One of the ship's pilots, Simon Fernandez, basically said, "Look, we're dropping you at Roanoke. I'm not taking you any farther." Now, why did he do that? Historians still argue about it. Some think he was impatient. Some think he was worried about storms. Some think he just didn't like taking orders. But the result was the same. The settlers were forced to land at Roanoke Island. Imagine John White standing there on the deck, like, "Sir, this is literally the place we were trying to avoid." And the pilot shrugging like,
Oops.
"Anyway, good luck." So instead of settling in Chesapeake Bay as planned, the 115 settlers were basically dropped off in the wrong location, a place already filled with problems. Arrival at Roanoke, and something feels
Wrong.
When the settlers stepped onto Roanoke Island, they expected to find a calm, empty land ready for them. Instead, they found something unsettling. The old settlement was still there, but it wasn't alive. It wasn't hopeful. It wasn't welcoming. The fort from the earlier expedition looked damaged, like time and weather had beaten it down. The houses were gone or falling apart. Tools were missing. Objects that should have been there weren't. Some things looked destroyed. Some things looked abandoned. Some things looked like someone had left in a hurry. It was like walking into an old campsite where the fire has gone out, the food is cold, and nobody is around to tell you what happened. Even the forest felt heavy. Quiet.
Too quiet.
John White knew immediately. Something bad had happened to the previous English settlers. And now, he had 115 people, including pregnant women, little children, and exhausted families, standing on land where an earlier colony had already failed. Not exactly the warm welcome they hoped for. Tension is already in the air. And the problems didn't stop there. The local tribes already had mixed feelings about the English. Some remembered the earlier soldiers. Some had suffered from conflicts and misunderstandings. Some feared the English would take food and land. When John White tried to talk with them, many tribes kept their distance. Some were friendly, some were silent, some were simply gone. It was as if the island itself was saying, "Be careful. Something already went wrong here." The settlers felt that tension. They saw it in the damaged fort. They saw it in the empty structures. They felt it in the air, like a storm forming far away. But they didn't have a choice. The ship couldn't take them somewhere else. They had been left here, on this island, with whatever fate was waiting. A new hope, with old shadows behind it. Still, the settlers tried to stay hopeful. They cleaned the fort. They rebuilt homes. They planted where they could. They explored the island. They talked to the friendlier tribes. They smiled at the children playing in the sand. They tried to believe Roanoke could work. But deep down, everyone wondered the same thing. If the last settlers vanished, are we safe here? John White didn't show his fear, but he felt it in every quiet night, in every missing tool, in every uneasy look from the tribes. Roanoke was supposed to be a fresh start, but it already had ghosts. Not actual ghosts, don't worry. This is still a bedtime story. But the ghost of failure. The ghost of the earlier colony. The ghost of fear that something wasn't right. And yet hope stayed alive. Because hope always does. Here is Chapter 5 in the same calm, cozy, bedtime documentary tone. Simple English, gentle pacing, light humor, and 1,000 to 1,100 words. Settle in again. Let your breathing slow down. This chapter is softer, warmer, a moment of light in the middle of a tense and uncertain settlement. Because even in strange places, life still finds a way to continue. This is the chapter where a tiny newborn becomes a symbol of hope. Eleanor Dare, a mother far from home. Let's start with Eleanor Dare, John White's daughter. Imagine her for a moment. A young woman, pregnant, traveling across the ocean for weeks, dealing with shaky ships, salty food, and sailors who definitely did not smell like roses. If anyone deserved a comfortable bed and a quiet house, it was her. Instead, she arrived at Roanoke Island, a place with broken houses, uneasy neighbors, and more mosquitoes than you'd ever want in one lifetime. But Eleanor was strong. She had her husband, Ananias Dare, beside her. She had her father leading the colony, and she had over 100 people who treated her pregnancy like the colony's most precious treasure. Everyone knew her baby would be important. Nobody knew how important. A warm morning in August. Now picture this. It's August 1587. The sun rises gently over the calm Roanoke waters, turning them gold. The trees stand still in the warm air. Birds move quietly between branches. Inside one of the small wooden houses, Eleanor goes into labor. There are no hospitals, no nurses, no soft white beds with blinking machines, just a simple wooden room, a few women helping her, and a father pacing outside, trying not to faint even though he's pretending he's totally calm. And then, in that peaceful, humid morning, a cry breaks the air. A baby girl is born. The first English baby in the New World. Her name was Virginia Dare. She was the first English child ever born in North America. Think about that for a moment. In a place filled with mystery, danger, and confusion, a tiny newborn suddenly appears, bringing light into the story. The settlers celebrated quietly, not loudly, because it was a small colony and everyone was tired, but with real joy. The baby represented something bigger than all of them.
Hope. Continuity.
A sign that maybe, just maybe, this settlement could survive. John White held his granddaughter, and for a moment, the tension of the island faded. The damaged fort didn't matter. The missing tools didn't matter. The uneasy native tribes didn't matter. Right there, in his arms, was the future, a new beginning. Why her birth meant so much. Virginia Dare wasn't just a baby. She was a symbol, like a living flag planted on the soil. She meant England had roots in the New World. Families weren't just visiting, they were staying. Life could continue, even in a place filled with uncertainty. The colony wasn't just an experiment anymore, it was a community. For the settlers, who had just discovered their fort damaged and their earlier homes ruined, her birth felt like the island whispering, "Don't give up yet." Even though history later turned Roanoke into a mystery, in this moment, Virginia's birth made everything feel possible. Life in the wooden houses. Now, let's step into the daily life of the colony. Imagine little wooden houses made from rough logs, with roofs that creaked when the wind blew. Inside, life was simple but steady. People cooked over small fires. Children played in the sand or collected seashells. Families repaired tools, wove baskets, and stored whatever food they could gather. The smell of wood smoke mixed with salty air. Everyone listened for the ocean, the colony's constant background music. The settlers' routines were shaped by sunlight and survival. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was taken for granted. Food, the daily challenge. Gathering food was one of the colony's biggest struggles. Some days they fished in the quiet waters. Other days they hunted small animals or collected berries. The soil wasn't great for farming, so crops struggled. Sometimes the native Croatan people helped, offering knowledge or sharing small amounts of food. But other tribes, still upset about the earlier English visits, avoided them completely. So every meal felt like an achievement. A bowl of corn mush? Victory. A fish stew? A miracle. A handful of berries? 5-star dining. The settlers learned to be grateful for whatever the island offered. Exploring the island. Roanoke wasn't large, but it was full of things to discover. The settlers explored gently, walking through pine forests, along soft sandy paths, and beside marshy areas glowing in the sunlight. They studied the plants, the wildlife, the coastline. Every new discovery became part of their survival plan. Imagine children running along the beach, collecting driftwood and pretending seaweed was treasure. Imagine craftsmen searching for straight branches to use as tools. Imagine families watching the sunset from the shore after a long, exhausting day. Life was simple but full of effort. Virginia Dare, a symbol in a strange land. Inside all this hard daily work, little Virginia Dare slept peacefully. Her birth made everyone try harder. Protect the colony. Protect the future. Protect the child. She became a reminder of everything they wanted. A safe home, a stable settlement, a future generation that would grow up knowing this land. A connection between England and the New World. In a way, she was the colony's soft heartbeat. Even though she was just a baby, she carried the dreams of over 100 people on her tiny shoulders. John White's mixed emotions. For John White, the days after her birth were bittersweet. He was proud. He was emotional. He was hopeful. But he was also worried. The colony needed supplies badly. They were short on tools, food, and medical goods. And tensions with some tribes were rising again. He looked at his daughter. He looked at his granddaughter. And he knew he might have to leave the colony soon to get help. But for now, he let himself enjoy the moment. A grandfather holding a newborn in a quiet settlement, hoping he was looking at the beginning of something great, not the beginning of one of history's saddest mysteries. A gentle ending to the chapter. So, Chapter 5 ends here, with the crying of a newborn mixing softly with the ocean breeze. Virginia Dare's birth didn't solve the colony's problems, but it gave them a reason to keep trying. For one peaceful moment, Roanoke wasn't a place of fear or mystery. It was simply a home, small, imperfect, but full of people who still believed in the future. And at the center of it all, a baby girl wrapped in a tiny cloth, unaware of the history being written around her. Now that little Virginia Dare has been born, and the hope of the colony has grown a bit brighter, life on Roanoke Island settles into a rhythm, at least as much as life in a new, uncertain place ever can. Let's take a slow walk with the settlers through their days, listening to the soft wind, the quiet waves, and the occasional laughter or cry from the children. Morning routines. Each day began with the sun rising over the calm waters. The settlers woke to a chorus of birds and the gentle lap of waves against the shore. The smell of salt mixed with wood smoke from small fires in each wooden house. Everyone had a role. Men fetched water, repaired tools, or explored nearby forests. Women tended gardens, cooked meals, cleaned homes, or cared for children. Even the older children had jobs, gathering firewood, helping in the fields, or watching their younger siblings. Breakfast was usually simple: corn mush, dried fish, or whatever the settlers could catch or gather. But even a small meal felt like a celebration. Every edible morsel was a reminder that life could continue here, on this strange new island. Building and repairing. The settlers spent a lot of time fixing what the previous colony had left behind. Broken fences, collapsing houses, damaged tools, everything needed attention. John White encouraged everyone to work together, even the children who could lift a log or help with small tasks. Carpenters were especially busy. They measured and sawed, hammered and nailed, building homes that could withstand storms. Every new plank felt like progress. Every repaired roof felt like security. And yet, the work was never-ending. Nature always won small victories. Rainstorms made roofs leak, wind toppled fences, and overgrown weeds returned overnight like tiny green rebels. Farming and food gathering. Growing food on Roanoke Island wasn't easy. The soil was rocky in some places, marshy in others. The crops often struggled. Corn, beans, and squash were planted, but the settlers had to wait patiently and hope for rain at the right time. Fishing was essential. Men waded into the calm waters or sailed small boats to catch fish, crabs, and shellfish. Gathering fruits and edible plants from the forest became a daily adventure. They learned to recognize what was safe to eat and what could make you sick for a week. Sometimes, supplies from England arrived too late or were delayed. On those days, the settlers learned to be resourceful, and their appreciation for a simple meal grew even stronger. Interactions with native tribes. Life on the island was also about learning to coexist with the local tribes, primarily the Croatan. These people had lived on Roanoke for generations, knew the land intimately, and could teach the settlers survival skills. Some settlers formed friendships. Croatan guides showed them how to fish with nets, identify edible plants, and avoid dangerous areas. Children sometimes played together under watchful eyes. It was a fragile but meaningful connection, a little bridge between worlds. But not all tribes were friendly. Memories of past conflicts from the 1585 colony made some wary or distant. This tension hung in the air, a quiet reminder that Roanoke was never entirely safe. Daily challenges and small triumphs. The settlers' daily life was a mix of hardships and small victories. They faced mosquitoes that buzzed endlessly, rainstorms that flooded their homes, limited supplies from England, confusing and unfamiliar terrain. Yet each challenge was met with a determined spirit. A repaired fence, a successful fish catch, a small garden sprouting green leaves. Each was celebrated quietly but joyfully. Children laughed and played along the sandy shores. Mothers cleaned and mended clothes. Fathers explored and hunted. The settlers learned to find satisfaction in small achievements, understanding that survival was itself a triumph. Community and family life. Life in the colony wasn't only about survival. It was about creating a home in the middle of nowhere. Families gathered in the evenings, sharing stories, laughter, and sometimes songs. Children chased each other along the beaches while parents kept watch. Everyone looked after one another. After all, if someone fell sick or was hurt, the whole colony would feel it. Even John White found moments to paint and sketch. He documented what he saw: the forest, the coastline, the people, and especially his granddaughter, Virginia Dare. These paintings weren't just art. They were records of hope, resilience, and life continuing in the new world. Hope and uncertainty. Despite the small joys, the settlers' new life was fragile. Supplies were limited. Conflicts with certain tribes remained a concern. And the island itself was unpredictable. Storms could strike without warning. Food could fail. The future felt delicate. Yet, the birth of Virginia Dare reminded them why they were here. She was a symbol of continuity, a living connection to England, proof that families could survive and flourish in a land so different from home. Even during storms, while the wind rattled their wooden houses and rain poured through the roofs, the settlers clung to hope. They told stories to children, repaired tools, and tended gardens. Every small act was a declaration. We are here. We will endure. We will try. The calm before the storm. As days passed, Roanoke settled into a rhythm. Not a perfect rhythm. There were always challenges, but a rhythm nonetheless. Work, rest, exploration, meals, and small celebrations became the colony's heartbeat. Evenings were soft. Settlers would gather around small fires, talking quietly, listening to the ocean, and feeling grateful for the moments of calm. Children would drift to sleep under woven blankets, the faint sounds of waves and night birds lulling them. And in these moments, the colony seemed almost peaceful, almost normal, almost like home. But deep down, everyone felt it. Roanoke Island held secrets. Some whispered about the first colony. Others worried about what they couldn't see in the forests. And even John White, careful and calm, understood that life here balanced between hope and uncertainty. A gentle ending to the chapter. Chapter 6 closes on a soft note. Imagine little Virginia Dare sleeping in her mother's arms. The sun dips low over calm waters, casting gold across wooden homes. Families share quiet laughter. Children dream of adventures. The colony works, lives, and survives, fragile, yet resilient. Roanoke is calm tonight, but history has a way of shifting even the quietest waters. And soon, that calm will be tested. Soon, the story of this colony will enter the world of mystery and whispers, the story we still tell today, hundreds of years later. For now, we watch the gentle waves, hear the soft cries of newborns, the quiet work of settlers, and let the island lull us to sleep. Perfect. Here's Chapter 7 in the same calm, bedtime story style, around 1,000 to 1,100 words, simple English, lightly humorous and cozy. Now, let's drift into a quieter, more anxious part of the story, the moment when hope meets responsibility and the weight of a colony rests on one man's shoulders. John White, thoughtful leader and proud grandfather, faces a difficult choice. The need for supplies. Life on Roanoke Island had settled into a rhythm, yes, but the colony's needs were growing. Food was limited. Tools were wearing out. Houses needed repairs. And they had no way to easily get more supplies from England. Even with friendly Croatan guides and the settlers' hard work, shortages loomed. Every day, the colony relied on whatever the island could provide: fish, small game, wild plants, and rainwater. John White knew it wouldn't last. He looked at the colony, exhausted families, children laughing quietly, mothers working tirelessly, men trying to fish, hunt, and farm. He saw hope in little Virginia Dare's eyes, and he knew he had to do something. A difficult decision. White realized the only solution was to return to England to bring supplies. But leaving wasn't easy. He would be abandoning the colony temporarily. He would leave his daughter, Eleanor, and his granddaughter, Virginia, in the care of others. And the ocean was unpredictable, dangerous, and slow. It was a huge risk. Any delay or storm could spell disaster. But White's calm, practical mind understood that without supplies, the colony wouldn't survive. So he made the decision. He would sail back to England and return as quickly as possible. Preparing for the voyage. The preparations were tense, but careful. White had to organize a ship, gather provisions for himself, and trust others to manage the colony while he was gone. The settlers, understanding the necessity, tried to stay calm. They packed tools, repaired small homes, and made plans for the months ahead. Even Eleanor, though worried for herself and her baby, knew that survival required sacrifice. Children probably sensed the tension but didn't fully understand. They played along the shores, collecting driftwood or seashells as their parents quietly planned for the voyage, saying goodbye. Leaving wasn't easy. Imagine White standing on the shore, watching the colony fade behind him as his ship rocked gently in the harbor. He saw families waving quietly, men nodding, mothers clutching children. He looked at his daughter and granddaughter, hoping they would be safe. There was no dramatic farewell, no fanfare, no promises of "I'll be back in a month." Only the knowledge that the sea could be cruel, slow, and unpredictable. And yet, White sailed with determination. He had to make it back. He had to bring supplies. He had to save the colony he believed in. The voyage to England. The journey was long, slow, and full of uncertainty. Ships in the 1500s weren't comfortable or fast. The wind was unpredictable. Storms threatened. Food and fresh water were limited. White probably spent his days pacing the deck, checking maps, and thinking about the people he had left behind. Nights were filled with the gentle rocking of the ship, the soft sound of waves against the hull, and the distant call of seabirds. Even with danger around every corner, he pressed on. England was far, and time was precious. Arrival in England. Finally, after weeks at sea, John White arrived back in England. Safe but anxious. England was bustling with excitement, politics, and opportunities. But White's mind was entirely on Roanoke. He needed supplies, tools, and a new ship to return quickly. He met with Sir Walter Raleigh, explaining the colony's needs: food, weapons, building materials, and manpower. Raleigh promised help, and White prepared for a return voyage, eager to reach his daughter, granddaughter, and the settlers. Delays and obstacles. But as history often reminds us, the sea and politics don't always cooperate. England was at war with Spain. The Spanish Armada threatened the coast, diverting ships and resources. Supplies that White expected were delayed. There were bureaucratic hurdles, negotiations, and planning that seemed endless. Every day, White probably imagined the colony waiting, wondering if anyone was safe. He may have paced his quarters at night, staring out at the English Channel, praying the settlers could hold on. Months passed. Weeks turned into longer months. Every delay weighed heavier on him, and the worry for the colony never left his mind. The emotional toll. Think about John White as a man, a grandfather, father, leader, and explorer. He had left behind the first English baby born in the New World. He had left families on an island full of challenges. He carried hope, responsibility, and fear all at once. Imagine lying in bed, drawing maps by candlelight, thinking of Virginia Dare's small face and the colony's fragile wooden homes. Each day of delay was a day he feared the colony might fall apart. Yet he held on to hope. Hope had brought the settlers across the ocean once. Hope would guide him back to Roanoke. A colony waiting. Back on Roanoke, life continued as best it could. Families tended gardens, fished, repaired homes, and cared for children. But without John White, a leader and protector, the colony felt the absence. The settlers worked quietly, nervously, hoping the voyage would succeed. Every sighting of a ship on the horizon brought excitement and disappointment when it wasn't White returning. Even little Virginia Dare, unaware of the worry surrounding her, grew and thrived. She was the colony's heartbeat, the reminder of why survival mattered. A gentle ending to the chapter. Chapter 7 closes with a soft, quiet moment. John White at sea, leaning against the railing, looking at the endless horizon. Waves lap softly against the hull. The wind whispers through the rigging. The future is uncertain, but determination holds him steady. Back on Roanoke, Families continue their daily routines, fishing, farming, repairing, laughing softly, and holding on to hope. History hasn't yet revealed what will happen. But for now, there is a leader on a mission, a colony trying to endure, and the gentle rhythm of life continuing against the odds. The story pauses here, like a breath before the next chapter. A story of hope, courage, and the fragile balance between survival and the unknown.
Perfect.
Here's Chapter 8 in the same calm, bedtime story style. Around 1,000 to 1,100 words, cozy, simple, lightly humorous. Now, let's drift into a part of the story where time stretches and worry grows. John White is ready to sail back to Roanoke, but the world beyond Colony has its own plans, slow, dangerous, and unpredictable. This chapter is about patience, tension, and the quiet power of nature and history. England in turmoil. When John White arrived back in England, he was focused only on one thing: returning to the colony with supplies. But England was busy. Busy and loud. Busy and worried. At this time, England and Spain were on the brink of war. The Spanish Armada, a fleet of enormous, well-armed ships, threatened the English coast. Cities were on high alert. Ships were commandeered for defense. Resources were stretched thin. For White, this was a nightmare. The colony needed food, tools, and support, but England's attention was on war. Ships were scarce, and every moment delayed meant the settlers on Roanoke had to survive without the supplies he intended to bring. Delays beyond control. Even with Raleigh's support, White faced months of frustrating delays. Ships had to be repaired. Crews had to be organized. Supplies had to be loaded. And every small bureaucratic hurdle felt massive. Imagine waiting day after day, watching the horizon from the English coast, thinking about the colony you left behind. Your mind drifts to the families, the children, little Virginia Dare, and you realize every hour matters. White probably paced. He probably sketched maps of the coast. He probably muttered under his breath about the Spanish and their big, annoying armada. But nothing sped the process up. He had to wait. The threat of the Spanish Armada. The Spanish Armada loomed like a dark cloud over England. For months, England prepared to defend itself. Ships were armed, cannons were loaded, and everyone feared invasion. For John White, it meant that any voyage back to Roanoke could be delayed or even impossible. The Armada moved along the seas. Storms battered ships. England braced for attack. White had to put his personal mission aside for the national emergency. The colony had to wait, and the clock kept ticking. Anxious, waiting on Roanoke. Back on Roanoke, life went on as best it could. The settlers continued farming, repairing homes, fishing, and gathering food. But each day, without supplies, brought small anxieties. The older settlers whispered about the previous colony. Children played, unaware of danger. Mothers tended to children, and fathers explored cautiously. The absence of John White made the colony feel fragile. They had a leader, yes, but he was far away. Each day, the wooden houses creaked, the winds blew, and the settlers wondered if White had been delayed, or if something worse had happened. Hope amid uncertainty. Even though months passed, the settlers tried to keep hope alive. Little Virginia Dare grew. Children laughed on the beach. Adults mended tools and prepared gardens. Even without new supplies, life continued. Hope had to be nurtured daily. Every cooked meal, every repaired fence, every basket of fish brought in from the shore was a small victory. Every success whispered, "We can survive. We can endure." The settlers didn't know it yet, but the tension of waiting would become one of the quiet threads of Roanoke's mystery. John White prepares again. Finally, after months of planning, The Armada threat subsided enough for White to prepare a return voyage. He gathered provisions, organized a ship, and selected a small crew. The journey would be long and dangerous, but he had to try. White's mind was full of worries. Would the settlers still be safe? Would the colony have survived the harsh months without supplies? Would little Virginia Dare be healthy? And, honestly, would he ever get to see the island again? But determination kept him moving. One step at a time, one wave at a time. The voyage back begins. White finally set sail. The ship left England, cutting through the calm waters of the Channel and moving into the wider Atlantic. Every mile brought him closer to Roanoke, and yet the ocean remained unpredictable. Winds changed without warning. Storms could appear suddenly. Food and fresh water were limited. On deck, White probably spent hours scanning the horizon. At night, he would check maps by candlelight, thinking about the families and children waiting for him. Sleep was short, meals were small, and the endless rocking of the ship was both lullaby and torment. A colony in silence. Back on Roanoke, months stretched into a waiting game. The settlers carried on with daily life, quietly anxious. Every sound from the water, a gull's cry, a wave crashing, a ship's sail in the distance, could raise hope. And every false alarm could bring disappointment. They relied on the skills they had, their relationships with the Croatan tribe, and their own resourcefulness. But every day, the island reminded them of the fragility of life far from home. The calm before the unknown. Chapter 8 closes on a gentle, suspenseful note. Imagine the Atlantic waves, rolling endlessly. John White's ship cuts slowly through the water, driven by hope, worry, and responsibility. The wind whispers against the sails, and the sun glimmers on the horizon. Meanwhile, Roanoke Island waits. Families work quietly, children play, and little Virginia Dare sleeps peacefully, unaware of the storms, literal and metaphorical, brewing across the ocean. The world seems calm, but history knows this calm is only temporary. What waits ahead will change everything, and the island's greatest mysteries are just around the corner. The story pauses here, like a deep breath, soft, patient, and full of tension, ready for the next chapter.
Perfect.
Here's Chapter 9 in the same cozy, calm, bedtime story tone, around 1,000 to 1,100 words, with gentle humor and simple English. Now, let's glide into a moment of relief and growing tension. John White has battled storms, delays, and wars to reach Roanoke again. The long-awaited return is here. But sometimes, the calm we hope for is just the start of something strange. Approaching the island. After months at sea, John White finally glimpsed the outer banks of North Carolina. Imagine standing on the deck after a long, exhausting voyage. The wind is salty but gentle. The waves sparkle under the sun. And in the distance, the familiar outline of the island appears. White must have felt a rush of relief, maybe even a quiet smile. He had survived the long Atlantic crossing, dodged storms, and navigated dangers. At last, he was coming home. But beneath that relief was a knot of worry. What would he find? Would the colony have survived? Were the settlers safe? And most importantly, was little Virginia Dare okay? The first signs. As the ship drew closer, White looked for the familiar signs of settlement. Smoke from fires, waving hands, the sound of voices. But something felt odd. The island seemed too quiet. The fort from 1587 was still there, but there was no activity. Houses seemed repaired, yes, but empty. Tools and supplies were in place, but no people. White's stomach probably sank a little. Quiet islands are beautiful and eerie. Quiet islands, when you expect people, are unnerving. Exploring the colony. Once he docked, White and his men stepped onto the sand, careful and alert. They walked through the fort, checking houses. Everything was in place, but everyone was gone. No children playing, no mothers cooking, no fathers repairing tools, not even a sound of a single dog barking. White must have felt disbelief. Did they leave? Were they attacked? Did something terrible happen while he was gone? He called out, hoping for a reply. Silence. Only the wind answered. The ocean whispered. The settlers who had survived the long wait were gone, vanished into the island or somewhere beyond. The mysterious clues. As White explored, he noticed a few strange details. On a tree, carved carefully, were the letters. Crow. A few homes had been dismantled, but tools were left behind. Fences were missing. Gardens were abandoned. It was as if the settlers had left quickly or been taken somewhere suddenly. White must have felt a mix of hope and dread. The letters were a clue, but what did they mean? Who or what had taken the settlers? And where could they have gone? Emotional impact. Think about John White at this moment. He had left the colony with a plan. He had returned with hope, supplies, and determination. He expected to see families thriving, children laughing, and little Virginia Dare smiling in her mother's arms. Instead, there was silence, empty homes, abandoned tools, and the carved letters, whispering a riddle he didn't yet understand. He was probably overwhelmed with sadness and anxiety. The first English baby born in the New World might still be out there somewhere. And every second he delayed in finding her could make survival harder. The letters and the Croatan tribe. White interpreted the letters CRO as possibly referring to the Croatan tribe. Perhaps the settlers had moved to live with them. Perhaps they were safe, blending into native villages. Or perhaps something more mysterious had occurred. The ambiguity haunted him. Every step he took on the sandy paths, every glance at the forest, every wave breaking on the shore reminded him that Roanoke had kept its secrets well. No sign of violence. Interestingly, there was no clear evidence of a violent attack. Homes were not burned. Tools were not destroyed. Fences weren't knocked down by hostile forces. It suggested that the settlers had left voluntarily, or at least without immediate violence. But voluntary or not, disappearing from an island without supplies, direction, or boats was terrifying. The settlers had ventured into the unknown once again, maybe hoping for safety, maybe just trying to survive. The weight of mystery. For John White, the return to Roanoke was bittersweet. He had survived storms, delays, and the Spanish threat. He had returned home, and yet the colony he loved, nurtured, and fought for had vanished. The letters on the tree became a symbol of hope and despair at the same time. Hope. Maybe the settlers were safe, living with the Croatan. Despair. No one could confirm anything. No one knew where they were. It was a puzzle that history would never fully solve. And John White was now at the center of it. A gentle ending to the chapter. Chapter 9 closes with a soft, haunting moment. Imagine the quiet island. Empty houses sway gently in the wind. Little Virginia Dare's crib sits undisturbed. Family's laughter is gone, replaced by the ocean's whisper. John White stands on the sand, looking at the trees, the water, the abandoned homes. The carved letters CRO gleam in the sunlight. The island seems beautiful and sad, peaceful and mysterious. He must have felt every emotion at once: hope, fear, grief, determination. And so, the story pauses here. Roanoke has given us a puzzle, a quiet enigma hidden beneath its soft beaches and gentle waves. The settlers vanished, leaving behind nothing but whispers, carvings, and memories. The calm of the island hides the mystery, inviting us to wonder, dream, and imagine what really happened.
Perfect.
Here's Chapter 10 in the same calm, bedtime story style, around 1,000 to 1,100 words, cozy, simple, and lightly humorous. Now, let's settle in for a chapter full of whispers, guesses, and mysteries. Roanoke had vanished, homes empty, settlers gone. Little Virginia Dare nowhere to be seen. And so, people began to wonder, imagine, and theorize. We'll explore the ideas slowly, like stories shared by the fire, each one soft, intriguing, and slightly spooky, but perfect for bedtime. The Vanishing, a historical puzzle. By the time John White returned, the colony had disappeared without a trace. The letters CRO carved on the tree were the only clue. Historians and storytellers have puzzled over this disappearance for centuries. Imagine being White, standing on the quiet island, staring at empty houses and thinking, where did they go? Are they safe? Are they gone forever? That question has haunted generations ever since. And over the years, several theories have emerged. Some are hopeful, some are grim, and some are downright mysterious. Theory 1. Integration with the Croatan tribe. The most popular theory is that the settlers joined the Croatan tribe. White had noticed friendly relations between some settlers and the Croatan. Perhaps the settlers moved inland, living with the tribe to survive. They could have blended into native villages, learned local customs, and continued life in a new form. If this is true, little Virginia Dare might have grown up among the Croatan, becoming part of a culture that valued survival, community, and knowledge of the land. This theory is comforting. It suggests that the settlers weren't harmed, just relocated. A gentle ending, almost like a soft bedtime sigh. Theory 2. Moving further north or south. Another idea is that the settlers traveled to another location. Perhaps they tried to sail north or south, hoping to reach a more secure area. They might have built small boats from the trees, carrying families and supplies. This theory is riskier. Imagine rowing in small, fragile boats across the Atlantic coast with women, children, and little food. Storms, waves, and exhaustion would have made survival difficult. Still, some historians think it's possible. They imagine tiny boats bobbing along the coastline, disappearing into the mist like ghosts of hope. Theory 3. Spanish attack. Some scholars wonder if the Spanish played a role. England and Spain were enemies at the time, and Spanish ships patrolled the coast. It's possible the settlers were attacked or captured, but evidence is lacking. There are no reports of burned homes, dead bodies, or large battles. Still, the idea adds a dark, tense flavor to the mystery. The quiet island, the carved letters, the vanished settlers all hint at danger from forces beyond the colony's control. Theory 4. Disease or starvation. Another possibility is that disease or starvation wiped out the colony. Life on Roanoke was hard. Limited food, harsh weather, and isolation made survival fragile. Illness could spread quickly, and a single outbreak might have been devastating. If disease struck, settlers might have moved inland seeking help. Or, tragically, they may not have survived. This theory is sad, but it fits with the difficulties of life in the New World. It reminds us that survival was never guaranteed, even with hope and determination. Theory 5. A combination of factors. Some historians think there wasn't just one reason for the disappearance. Maybe the settlers moved inland to join friendly tribes. Maybe some died from disease or accidents. Maybe storms or Spanish threats scattered others. Life on the island was unpredictable. The settlers faced many small dangers every day, and any combination of these could explain the mystery. This theory embraces uncertainty. It reminds us that real life, even centuries ago, was messy, fragile, and full of unknowns. Archaeology and modern clues. Archaeologists have searched for evidence of Roanoke settlers for decades. They have found old foundations of homes, European artifacts mixed with native tools, bones that might belong to settlers or local tribes. Some findings hint that the colonists may have moved inland and blended with native communities. Others remain inconclusive. Even today, archaeologists continue digging, examining, and theorizing, like detectives slowly opening a centuries-old mystery box. The role of John White's records. John White's paintings and notes provide valuable insight. He drew maps of the coastline, sketches of plants, and portraits of settlers. These images give us clues about the colony's life, the people, and the environment they faced. But his records don't tell us exactly what happened after he left. That silence is part of what makes the story haunting. The mystery isn't just in the disappearance, it's in the blank spaces of history. Why the mystery endures. The lost colony of Roanoke captivates us because it's unsolved. No clear ending exists. The island is quiet. Homes are empty. Little Virginia Dare's fate remains unknown. The carved letters CRO tease us, but offer no final answer. We imagine the settlers' lives, their courage, their hope. We imagine children playing along the shore, mothers preparing meals, fathers exploring forests, and then, quietly, they vanish. That blend of human life and disappearance makes Roanoke linger in our minds like a soft, haunting lullaby. A gentle ending to the chapter. Chapter 10 closes like this. Picture Roanoke Island at twilight. The waves lap softly against the shore. The wooden houses sway gently in the evening breeze. Birds return to trees, and the letters CRO remain carved in the bark, silent yet full of secrets. The island holds its breath, keeping the mystery safe. The settlers' stories, the fate of little Virginia Dare, and the life of families on the island are hidden in sand, soil, and memory. We may never know the full truth, but the story of Roanoke teaches us about hope, courage, and the fragility of life far from home. And in the soft, quiet moments, we can imagine the settlers, alive, dreaming, surviving somewhere beyond the horizon, leaving us with whispers of a story that will never truly end.
Perfect.
Here's Chapter 11 in the same calm, bedtime story style, around 1,000 to 1,100 words, cozy, gentle, and lightly humorous. Now, let's move into a chapter where history meets imagination and reality starts to blur with whispers, tales, and legends. Because when a colony vanishes without a trace, humans naturally create stories to fill the empty spaces. Roanoke became more than a real place. It became a symbol of mystery, courage, and the unknown. The birth of legends. Long after John White returned to England and the settlers vanished, people couldn't stop talking about the lost colony. Stories grew in the telling. Letters carved into trees were reimagined. Croatan tribes became mystical guides. Children playing on the shore turned into tiny phantoms in the night. Legends are comforting in a way. They allow us to believe the settlers survived, or that they became part of something bigger than themselves. And legends keep hope alive, even when history is silent. Virginia Dare, from baby to legend. Little Virginia Dare, the first English baby born in the New World, became the most famous figure in these stories. Over time, her name turned into a symbol of innocence, hope, and mystery. Folklore imagined her growing up among the Croatan, learning their ways, leading lost settlers, or even possessing mystical abilities. Some stories said she became a kind of guardian spirit of the land, guiding travelers safely through the forests. Others whispered she grew into a woman who bridged two worlds, English and native, carrying secrets that would never be fully known. Even though the Real Virginia Dare's fate is unknown, Legends have kept her alive in imagination for over 400 years. Stories of the settlers. Legends also grew about the settlers themselves. Some tales said the colonists were taken by supernatural forces. Other stories imagined them wandering inland, forming secret communities, or blending completely with the Croatan. Some people even claim to see descendants of the lost colony living among native tribes centuries later, though there is no concrete evidence. These stories show how deeply humans crave closure. When history leaves a gap, imagination rushes in, weaving tales that are sometimes comforting, sometimes eerie, and always compelling. Ghost stories and hauntings. Roanoke Island became a place of quiet, gentle hauntings in legend. Some say you can hear whispers in the wind along the shores. Others claim to see figures moving among the trees at dusk. And on foggy mornings, some storytellers describe shadows that seem to mimic children playing along the beach. Ghost stories aren't meant to scare so much as to remember. They are echoes of the lives once lived, parents caring for children, settlers tending gardens, people hoping, fearing, surviving. Even centuries later, Roanoke's quiet forests and gentle waves seem to hum with the memory of those who vanished. Books and pop culture. The story of Roanoke didn't just survive in whispers. Over time, writers, historians, and storytellers turned the lost colony into novels, plays, and documentaries. The tale of Virginia Dare and the missing settlers inspired poems and songs. Even today, Roanoke shows up in movies, TV shows, and legends. Each retelling mixes fact with imagination, and each version keeps the story alive, like a soft lantern glowing in the night. Why these legends endure? Why do legends of Roanoke capture our imagination so strongly? Perhaps because the mystery is unsolved. There is no final answer, no clear ending. The emptiness invites us to imagine possibilities. Were the settlers alive, hiding in the forests? Did they join the Croatan and start new lives? Or did the ocean, disease, or storms claim them silently? The uncertainty is comforting in a strange way. It allows the mind to explore hope, fear, adventure, and the fragile beauty of human life. Gentle lessons from legends. Even as legends exaggerate or twist the truth, they carry soft lessons. Life is fragile, but hope endures. Courage exists in everyday survival. Mystery invites imagination. Stories connect generations across centuries. We can look at Roanoke and imagine the settlers' courage, their laughter, their tears. And even if the exact events are unknown, the human emotions remain, alive in whispers, legends, and imagination. A light-hearted whisper. Imagine just for a moment that a Croatan child centuries ago told a story around a fire. They spoke of strange people who came from across the ocean, with funny clothes, curious tools, and a baby named Virginia Dare. The children listened, wide-eyed. Some doubted, some believed. And through the telling and retelling, the lost colony of Roanoke became timeless, a story that would float across oceans and centuries to reach us here, in our calm, quiet moments. A gentle ending to the chapter. Chapter 11 closes with a peaceful, reflective note. Roanoke Island lies quietly in the soft evening light. Waves lap gently against sandy shores. Forests whisper in the wind. Legends and history mingle like shadows in a firelit room. The settlers' laughter, tears, and courage echo softly. Little Virginia Dare grows in imagination, a symbol of hope and mystery. And the island holds its secrets carefully, inviting us to dream, imagine, and wonder. Even centuries later, Roanoke reminds us that life is fragile, hope is enduring, and some mysteries are meant to remain gentle whispers in the night.
Perfect.
Here's Chapter 12 in the same calm, bedtime story style, around 1,000 to 1,100 words, cozy, gentle, and lightly humorous. Now, let's take a soft, curious stroll into the world of modern archaeologists who have spent decades gently digging, examining, and trying to uncover the secrets of Roanoke. Even after more than 400 years, the island still has whispers to share, if we know how to listen. The allure of the lost colony. Archaeologists are like detectives, only their clues are buried in sand, soil, and old wooden beams. Roanoke has always been a mysterious puzzle. The carved letters CRO, the vanished settlers, the birth of Virginia Dare. All of it invites exploration. Modern researchers want to know what really happened. But unlike Hollywood adventure stories, archaeology is slow, careful work. Every shovel of dirt is examined. Every piece of pottery, bone, or metal is studied. Even tiny fragments can tell huge stories. Early excavations. Excavations at Roanoke began in the 19th and 20th centuries. Early archaeologists uncovered remnants of the 16th century settlement. Foundations of homes. Broken tools. Pieces of European ceramics. These findings confirmed what historians already suspected. There had indeed been an English settlement on the island. But while they proved the colony existed, they didn't explain why it vanished. The mystery remained intact, hiding beneath the quiet forests and soft sand. Recent discoveries. More recently, archaeologists have used modern techniques to dig deeper, sometimes literally. Ground-penetrating radar, chemical analysis, and careful excavation have revealed subtle clues. Artifacts that suggest settlers may have moved inland. European objects mixed with Native American tools, hinting at possible integration. Fire pits, post holes, and remnants of fences that show daily life continued, at least for a time. Each discovery adds a piece to the puzzle, like soft whispers from the past. Nothing is conclusive yet, but every artifact brings historians and archaeologists closer to understanding the fate of the lost colony. The role of the Croatan tribe. Modern studies also pay attention to the Croatan tribe and their descendants. Some artifacts suggest that settlers may have lived with the Croatan temporarily or permanently. Archaeologists have found items that blend European and native styles, a spoon alongside a traditional tool, a fragment of pottery near a Croatan hearth. These clues don't tell the full story, but they support the theory that at least some settlers integrated with native communities. Life may have continued quietly, far from the maps and records of England. Challenges of archaeology. Roanoke is a tricky place to study. Time, storms, and natural erosion have changed the landscape. Trees grow where houses once stood. Sand covers old pathways. Coastal tides wash away clues. Even careful excavation can miss small traces. Archaeologists sometimes uncover one artifact and then wait years for context. Patience is essential. And much like the settlers themselves, researchers must adapt to the land, learn its secrets slowly, and respect its rhythms, connecting history and mystery. Modern archaeology doesn't just look for objects, it tries to connect the past to the human story. Excavated foundations tell us where settlers lived. Cooking tools hint at daily meals. Broken fences show where families once worked and played. Even small finds, like a child's toy or a piece of jewelry, can spark the imagination, letting us picture the lives of people who lived here centuries ago. In this way, archaeology bridges fact and legend. It reminds us that behind every mystery are real people with hopes, fears, and dreams. The ongoing search. Even today, the search for answers continues. Archaeologists, historians, and volunteers return to Roanoke season after season. They dig, survey, and analyze, always aware that the smallest clue could be the key. And yet, they respect the island's quiet presence. They move gently, knowing the land has held these secrets for centuries. Roanoke doesn't reveal everything at once. It whispers slowly, like a story meant to be savored, not rushed. Why it captivates us. Modern discoveries keep the mystery alive. Every new artifact, every subtle clue, reignites imagination. People continue to visit Roanoke, read about the colony, and tell stories of the lost colony. The combination of fact, archaeology, and legend creates a timeless fascination. We are drawn to Roanoke because it shows the resilience of hope, the fragility of life, and the way stories endure long after people are gone. A gentle ending to the chapter. Chapter 12 closes on a soft, reflective note. Picture a quiet excavation at sunset. Archaeologists gently brush soil away from a small post hole. The ocean glimmers nearby, soft waves breaking on the shore. Birds call in the trees, and a warm breeze stirs the sand. Somewhere beneath their hands, centuries of human life rest quietly. Homes, families, meals, and laughter. Little Virginia Dare may have grown, played, and dreamed somewhere far from here. Families may have survived, blending into new communities. The island holds its secrets still, but every discovery brings us closer, letting us imagine daily life, courage, and hope. Roanoke whispers softly, inviting us to listen, dream, and remember. The lost colony may remain a mystery, but its story continues, alive in artifacts, imagination, and our gentle curiosity.
Perfect.
Here's Chapter 13 in the same calm, bedtime story style, around 1,000 to 1,100 words, cozy, gentle, and lightly humorous. Now, let's wander softly into the world of speculation. The lost colony vanished, and history left only whispers behind. Over centuries, people have imagined many possibilities, some hopeful, some eerie, some that make you scratch your head and whisper, This chapter is all about those gentle guesses, like stories told quietly around a fire. Moving in with the Croatan. One of the most comforting ideas is that the settlers joined the Croatan tribe. Historians think that after months of waiting and surviving on their own, the settlers might have moved inland to live with the Croatan. They could have learned local skills, fishing, farming native crops, and crafting tools suited to the land. This theory suggests that little Virginia Dare grew up happily among the Croatan, her English heritage blending with native knowledge. Families may have thrived quietly, unnoticed by the distant eyes of England. It's a peaceful vision, imagining the colony safe, growing, and blending into a new world. Heading north or south. Another possibility is that the settlers tried to relocate along the coast. Perhaps they made small boats from trees, carrying families north or south in search of better land. Maybe they hoped to find another English settlement or a safer harbor. This idea is riskier. The Atlantic coast can be harsh, full of storms and strong currents. Small boats carrying children, women, and elderly settlers would face enormous challenges. Yet, some historians argue that moving along the coast might have been the only option if they felt vulnerable on Roanoke. It's a vision of bravery mixed with desperation, like an adventure whispered through the waves. Spanish capture or attack. Some theories imagine a darker fate. The Spanish may have attacked or captured the settlers. England and Spain were rivals at the time, and Spanish ships patrolled the Atlantic. Some suggest the Spanish may have removed or destroyed the colony to prevent an English foothold. Evidence is sparse, though. Homes were intact, tools remained, and the letters CRO suggested some voluntary movement rather than violence. Still, the possibility adds a shadow to the story, reminding us how dangerous life was in the 16th century. Dissolution and starvation. Another idea is that some settlers didn't survive the island's hardships. Life on Roanoke was unpredictable. Storms, disease, lack of food, and isolation could easily lead to disaster. Some families might have perished, while others scattered to survive. Archaeologists have found evidence of small fires, dismantled structures, and abandoned gardens, all signs that survival was a daily challenge. This theory is sad but realistic, showing how even the most hopeful plans can face unforgiving odds. A combination of possibilities. Many modern historians think there wasn't just one explanation. Maybe some settlers moved inland with the Croatan. Maybe some tried to relocate along the coast. Perhaps a few were lost to illness or storms. And a few might have faced hostile encounters. Life was fragile, and the unknowns were many. The combination theory embraces the complexity of survival, imagination, and human endurance. Legends and oral histories. Over centuries, oral histories added gentle embellishments. Some stories claim settlers were seen living among native tribes generations later. Others suggest they founded secret communities, hidden from explorers' maps. Even if these accounts are exaggerated, they reflect a human desire to keep hope alive. People want to believe the settlers survived, that Virginia Dare grew up somewhere, that families endured against the odds. Evidence from archaeology. Modern archaeology provides small hints. Excavation and storytelling. The lost colony's fate remains unknown. The letters carved into trees are the only clear sign left behind. Ciaro, a soft whisper from the past. Everything else is conjecture. European artifacts mixed with Native American tools suggest possible integration. Foundations and post holes show signs of habitation beyond White's return. Soil analysis indicates farming, cooking, and human activity away from the original fort. These clues don't give a definitive answer, but support the idea that the settlers might have moved, adapted, and survived quietly. The mystery remains. Despite centuries of research, explore, imagination, and careful interpretation, this uncertainty is part of the story's charm. Roanoke teaches us that life is full of questions without easy answers. And sometimes, the questions themselves are worth savoring, like gentle waves lapping at the shore. A gentle ending to the chapter. Chapter 13 closes with a calm, reflective image. Imagine the island at dusk. The forest rustles softly in the breeze. Waves break gently along the shore. Shadows stretch across abandoned wooden houses. Somewhere inland, families may have survived, blending with the land and its people. The settlers' stories float in whispers, laughter, fear, hope, and courage. Little Virginia Dare grows in imagination as a symbol of innocence and resilience. And on the quiet, sandy beaches of Roanoke, the past and the present meet softly, inviting us to dream, wonder, and imagine what really happened.
Perfect.
Here's chapter 14 in the same calm, bedtime story style, around 1,000 to 1,100 words, cozy, gentle, and lightly humorous. Now, let's settle into a chapter that is less about mystery and more about how Roanoke shaped the imagination, culture, and stories of generations. Even though the colony vanished, its legacy is very much alive, like a quiet flame flickering across history. Roanoke in literature. The story of the lost colony has inspired countless writers. Poets, novelists, and historians have retold the tale, mixing facts with imagination. From simple pamphlets in the 16th century to modern novels, Roanoke has become a symbol of adventure, courage, and mystery. Writers often focus on Virginia Dare as a symbol of hope, the first English child born in the New World. She represents innocence, new beginnings, and the fragile optimism of people venturing into unknown lands. Through literature, Roanoke transformed from an unsolved historical mystery into a story that could live in the hearts of readers, just as vivid as the real island itself. Roanoke in folklore. Legends, myths, and ghost stories grew alongside historical accounts. Tales of settlers living with native tribes, whispers of spirits on the island, and mysterious sightings in the woods all became part of local folklore. For centuries, storytellers in North Carolina shared these tales. Around fires, children listened wide-eyed. Adults smiled knowingly. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were a way to remember courage and mystery, keeping the lost colony alive in collective memory. Virginia Dare as a cultural icon. Virginia Dare's story has transcended history books. She appears in poems, novels, folk songs, even Halloween stories. Her name is synonymous with the hope and innocence of new beginnings. Over time, she became a figure representing the blending of cultures, as some theories suggest she may have lived with the Croatan tribe. Virginia Dare's legacy reminds us that even a single life, a tiny baby born on a quiet island, can echo through centuries. Roanoke in popular culture. The Lost Colony has also captured popular imagination through TV shows, movies, and documentaries. Modern creators are fascinated by the mix of history and mystery. Some portray the settlers as adventurous explorers. Others imagine supernatural elements or secret survival stories. This cultural fascination keeps Roanoke relevant. Even centuries later, people watch, read, and dream about what might have happened. The story continues to evolve, just like the island itself. Education and museums. Roanoke's story is also part of educational programs and museums. Visitors can walk the island, see reconstructions of 16th century homes, and learn about daily life in the colony. Archaeological exhibits show artifacts found on site, giving a tangible connection to the past. For students and history enthusiasts, Roanoke isn't just a story. It's an interactive lesson about courage, survival, and human curiosity. The mystery invites learners to think critically and creatively. Inspiration for exploration. Roanoke has inspired explorers and archaeologists to keep searching. The mystery encourages curiosity and persistence, teaching us that sometimes the answers are hidden and discoveries require patience. Modern archaeology, combined with historical research, continues to reveal new insights. Even small clues, like a fragment of pottery or a carved post, remind us that human stories endure, waiting to be uncovered and understood. Lessons from the Lost Colony. The legacy of Roanoke isn't just about vanished settlers. It's about what we learn from their story. Courage matters, even in unknown lands. Hope can persist, even when outcomes are uncertain. Mystery invites imagination, keeping history alive. Communities and cultures can adapt, survive, and transform. Even in disappearance, the Lost Colony teaches resilience, ingenuity, and the timeless human need to explore, understand, and dream. A gentle ending to the chapter. Chapter 14 closes on a reflective, cozy note. Picture Roanoke Island at sunset. The waves shimmer in soft gold, and the forest whispers in the evening breeze. Visitors wander quietly, imagining settlers' footsteps in the sand. Museums hold delicate artifacts, and local storytellers share legends that span centuries. Somewhere in this quiet place, little Virginia Dare's story lives on, in books, songs, whispers, and imaginations. The settlers' courage, hope, and daily lives echo softly across time. Roanoke's legacy reminds us that even when history leaves gaps, stories endure. They inspire, teach, and invite us to imagine, quietly, gently, and with curiosity in our hearts. Now, we arrive at the gentle conclusion of our journey through the Lost Colony. After centuries of searching, theorizing, and storytelling, Roanoke still whispers its secrets softly, inviting us to imagine, dream, and reflect. Even without definitive answers, the story remains alive, a quiet lullaby from history. The last known clues. When John White returned in 1590, he found empty houses, abandoned tools, and the carved letters CRO. Those letters have been the most enduring clue, a soft echo from the past. Some say it meant the settlers went to live with the Croatan tribe. Others think it might have been a reference to a place or person unknown to us today. Whatever the letters meant, they are a gentle reminder that the settlers' lives didn't end quietly. They left traces, small whispers, hints, and stories for us to ponder centuries later. A puzzle that inspires imagination. The disappearance of the colony is one of history's most famous mysteries. And perhaps that's why it endures. Because there is no single answer, people have filled the gaps with imagination, creativity, and hope. Stories of settlers surviving with the Croatan, of Virginia Dare growing up to lead a new life, or of families quietly disappearing into forests and rivers continue to captivate us. The mystery invites us to think, wonder, and dream. It allows us to imagine possibilities that history alone cannot provide. Lessons in patience and hope. The story of Roanoke reminds us of patience and hope. John White waited, delayed by war and storms, hoping to return. The settlers waited, hoping for supplies and support. And we, centuries later, continue to wait for answers, piecing together clues, listening to whispers in the sand, imagining their lives. There's a quiet beauty in this. Life, survival, and courage don't always come with neat endings. Sometimes the journey, filled with perseverance, courage, and hope, is just as important as the conclusion. The blend of fact and legend. Roanoke shows us how history and legend can mingle gracefully. Fact: settlers arrived in 1587 and disappeared by 1590. Fact: John White returned to find CRO carved on a tree. Legend: Virginia Dare grew up with the Croatan, becoming a figure of hope. Legend: some settlers formed hidden communities or became spirits in the woods. Together, fact and legend create a rich tapestry that stretches across centuries, reminding us that the human imagination is part of history. Stories aren't just about events. They're about feelings, curiosity, and the need to understand. Why Roanoke captivates us. Even today, the story of Roanoke captivates. It appeals to curiosity. We wonder what happened, piecing together clues like a soft puzzle. Empathy. We imagine settlers' struggles, fears, and hopes. Imagination. We let the story drift into legends and dreams. Reflection. We see how humans adapt, survive, and endure. It's a tale that's both historical and emotional, perfect for quiet reflection, storytelling, and bedtime contemplation. A peaceful, reflective ending. Imagine Roanoke Island at night. The ocean laps gently against the shore. The wind rustles leaves in the forest. Wooden homes sway quietly, their foundations still holding echoes of daily life long past. Somewhere, children's laughter might be imagined, mothers tending fires, fathers exploring the coast, all now whispers of history. The letters CRO gleam faintly in our imagination, a soft reminder of mystery and hope. The settlers may have survived in ways we cannot know. Virginia Dare may have grown, laughed, and dreamed in a life hidden from maps and records. Families may have blended with native tribes, forming stories lost to time, but remembered in spirit. The enduring mystery. Roanoke remains one of history's gentlest enigmas. It teaches us, life is fragile, but courage endures. Hope can persist even when outcomes are uncertain. Mystery invites imagination, keeping history alive. Stories connect us across time, generations, and cultures. And perhaps that is the true magic of Roanoke. The lost colony may never be fully explained, but it continues to live in our minds, hearts, and dreams, softly, gently, like a lullaby from the past. A final whisper. As we close this chapter, picture the island in the soft glow of moonlight. Waves shimmer silver. Trees sway quietly. Sand holds invisible footprints of settlers long gone. And somewhere in the hush of night, history whispers, "Remember us, imagine us, wonder about us, and keep our story alive." Roanoke invites us to dream gently, to reflect softly, and to remember that even mysteries without answers can teach, inspire, and soothe. The lost colony of Roanoke lives on, not just in facts, not just in legends, but in the quiet wonder of human curiosity, hope, and imagination.